Given the type of music I listen to today, it's hard to imagine a time where this was one of the bands that made my parents wonder about me.
6 a.m. and already the boy ain't right.
Yes, today we are ranking the albums of Devildriver, and we're starting with Devildriver in 2003. Dez's first outing post-Cold Chamber via Roadrunner Records, and as a big Cold Chamber fan back in the day, I gotta say I was pretty stoked for this in the lead-up, listening to the two pre-release singles over and over again. In fact, I remember the day I got this album at my local Best Buy. I drove there on release day, and they had just closed, and I was even begging the guy to let me in, but I ended up having to come back the next day. But I still have that very copy up on the shelf behind me. Banger tracks on this thing, heavier than anything he had really done before. Nothing's Wrong just rips you apart right at the top and sets the tone for a lot of great tough guy weightlifting lyrics. I Could Care Less is a fantastic single with that earworm guitar hook and sick grooves. Die and Die Now is another meat grinder, alternating the blackened tremolos with the chugging grooves. I Dreamed I Died and What Does It Take to Be a Man are super infectious, caveman-brained anthems. Cry For Me Sky is perfect for throwing up the horns. This album is a little bit more simplistic and stripped back than the ones that follow, but it's just a total slapper and still one of my favorites just for its sheer aggro energy, so this one's actually starting things off at S tier. Next up is The Fury of Our Maker's Hand in 2005. End of the Line is one of my all-time favorite metal album openers, period. It just goes so hard and sets the bar so high for what is thankfully a consistently strong album. Speaking of being ripped apart, we actually have Ripped Apart on this one. Fantastic title track for the closer, too. And then there's also Grinfucked and Hold Back the Day, which are both impossible to not bang your head and scream along to, and I love the throwback energy of the latter's music video. It combines everything I loved about the first album with a little bit more technicality and dynamic songwriting, stronger performances, and even more memorable songs almost go toe-to-toe with Lamb of God at that time. I'll just say it, this is still easily their best album, in my opinion. Even if you don't care for them in general, I think you could dig this one, so it's going to the top of S tier. Moving along, we have The Last Kind Words in 2007. Another incredible opener with Not All Who Wander Are Lost. I've spent many drives belting this one out during a commute. This thing is just ferocious and endlessly quotable, and speaking of which, Clouds Over California is also one of their catchiest tracks and ended up on Rock Band as DLC, if I'm not mistaken. Horn of Betrayal is my favorite deeper cut with a little melodic death metal energy in some of the riffs. The Axe Shall Fall makes for another great closer. I will say that this one's a little bit less consistent than the last two, especially in the second half. Still great though, and lots of great memories associated, particularly with these three albums for what feels like a different lifetime away at this point. I'm putting this one at A tier. Those were the days. Then we got Pray for Villains in 2009. So considering how much I loved those albums, I had pretty high hopes for this one now in my college years, but I remember listening to it and being genuinely confused at how it was even possible to listen to a Devildriver album and not feel the compulsion to Hulk out and break something. At the very least, I'd been conditioned to expect a banger opener, and the title track just doesn't do it the same for me. Something about the riffs and songwriting is just off, to the point that I find many of these songs to range from boring to outright annoying, which I know some people really enjoy this thing, but I don't know, it's sort of another sort of cilantro situation where maybe I'm just wired differently for this one. Honestly, to this day, the only tracks I really like are Bitter Pill and especially Resurrection Boulevard, which has that awesome sweeping guitar hook and those anthemic vocals that I expect from the band. Again, I know some people really adore this album, but for me, it's just a turning point where they went from being one of my favorite regular listen bands to kind of back of the shelf at that point. So this one's going to C tier. And as always, comment below if you disagree. I want to hear what your rankings are. Let's get a conversation going. It's more fun for the conversation when we have different opinions. But moving along, we have Beast in 2011. So given that last one, I wasn't particularly excited for this release either, but it definitely feels like an improvement. Dead to Rights is another great opener that's almost on par with the first 3 albums, if falling just a little bit short, and Bring the Fight to the Floor follows with a strong mosh pit worthy anthem. Shitlist is one of my personal favorites with some really memorable hooks and scream-along vocals. You Make Me Sick brings the D-beats, while Talons Out has this more slithering, serpent-like lead that worms its way into your brain. Very strong album overall, but definitely a little bloated at 55 minutes. It starts to drag for me around Cold Blooded, but still brings the intensity with Blur, and then rallies with another personal favorite of mine with the eerie atmosphere of Black Soul Choir. Still not best of the best, but it's up there, and this is one that's kind of like grown on me too over time, so I'm putting this at A tier. Next up is Winter Kills in 2013. Oath of the Abyss is just another okay opener. If it were up to me, I would have kicked things off with Desperate Times, which feels like it could have been on the Fury of Our Maker's hand and probably makes my top 10 songs list for the band. Ruthless is kind of interesting for a more dynamic track, and I also like the Appetite with the quiet intro slowly building up and the dramatic melodic overtones of the title track offset by the groovy chugs. Gutted is another strong song for the mosh pit. While Caring's Overkill toys with more melodies and wailing solos, and I even like their rendition of AWOL Nation's Sail. Another solid effort. It's about 5 minutes shorter than Beast, but I'd say with a lot more of the kind of forgettable tracks that keep it from rising higher in the ranks for me, so this one ended up at B tier. Then we got Trust No One in 2016. Now, I took one look at that piece of shit Photoshop-looking artwork and expected this album to suck. But as they say, never judge a book by its cover, because it ended up being one of my surprise bangers of that year.
Well. How the turntables...
Solid opener with Testimony of Truth and a couple of real heavy hitters here with the anthemic Bad Deeds, and above it all, really bringing back that old energy for me. This Deception and Daybreak have some really fun guitar work, the latter especially on that epic chorus, as does Trust No One with its earworm main hook and awesome soloing. This felt like a welcome return of more memorable songwriting and hooks and vocals that actually stuck with me after listening. It's not perfect and it still doesn't have the same legacy as the first 3, but it's a really strong listen and a much tighter one than the previous 2 at just 41 minutes. I might even put this one in the top 4 overall, so it's gone kind of wedged in the middle of A tier. Then we got Outlaws Till the End, Volume 1 in 2017.
Their music's bad and you should feel bad.
I don't even know what to say about this one. Like, on paper, I was genuinely intrigued about the idea of them doing country covers since they have some of that same kind of swagger, but Jesus Christ, I couldn't even finish this thing when it came out. I tried multiple times. Just completely unlistenable. Pray there's not a Volume 2. D tier. Moving along to Dealing with Demons, Volume 1 in 2020.
In the hanging garden, nothing is what it seems.
So after them climbing back to a quality release only to plummet so hard again, I had a hard time conjuring any remaining interest for this one, but I do it for science and sheer morbid curiosity. And the singles didn't do much to change my initial impressions either, as they were just so boring. And that's a word I'd use to describe most of this album. It's not bad, it's listenable, but it just makes me want to go to sleep half the time. I'm surprised to see some of the critics really enjoyed this thing, but I just don't know. Like, Keep Away From Me is okay, but lacking in energy. Nest of Vipers seemed like it would have promise with the backup vocals, but goes nowhere. And I think Iona is a snore with some really corny vocals, even for them. I'm always down for some clean vocals too, but the ones on Wishing just are not particularly good. Witches is the only track that I get much of anything from on this one. It's probably my favorite here. Again, it's far from the worst album out there. It's no Outlaws, but I do take it as a bad sign when the album's been out over 2 years and there's still no Wikipedia page for it. This one's going to C tier. And then we got Dealing with Demons Volume 2 in 2023.
To the death, to the ascension. There's nothing you wouldn't dare for my attention.
Fortunately though, sometimes the sequel is better than the original. Through the Depths didn't initially get me super excited as a single, feeling a bit paint by numbers, but it's a solid enough track that's grown on me and works well within the album as a whole. In my opinion, I Have No Pity should have been the lead single because this is a banger opener with a really infectious riff that gets you hyped to hear the rest. Mantra also has a little bit of that Last Kind Words energy with riffs like a tornado of fire. Then you've also got the more kind of mournful, dark melodies of Nothing Lasts Forever, Bloodbath, and It's a Hard Truth. If Blood is Life felt like another kind of dull single in isolation, but I do dig the triumphant sounding dual guitar harmonies and bluesy pace change around the middle. One of the more interesting tracks that stood out to me was Summoning, which on the surface seems unremarkable, but brings some interesting dynamics matching the usual grooves with more atmospheric, kind of country-tinged leads that actually remind me of August Burns Red. And then we also close on a strong note with This Relationship Broken, really bringing the heat with constantly shifting earworm riffs and infectious rhythms, as well as one of Dez's more energetic sounding performances in years. This is why having low expectations going in can actually be a blessing, because I ended up being pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this one. My only main criticism is I do miss some of the speed and sheer ferocity of the early material, but overall, I'll put this one at B tier. Y'all check out this playlist for more groove metal rankings like Lamb of God, or this one for new metal, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.